Welcome to another episode of Sports 360 Champion Speaks. Today's guest needs no introduction. He's been India's first grandmaster in chess, Viswanathan Anand, joining us on our special episode of Sports 360 Champion Speak. Vishy, good morning. Welcome to Sports 360 on the public broadcaster of India.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Vishy, you opened an online academy in the first place. Is this the search that you're looking for the new Anand through this particular online thing that you've launched?
It is an online academy. Right now, we're doing some of our classes. This is the Westbridge Anand Academy. I've started it with Westbridge. The idea is to support some of our most talented youngsters and help them take the next steps. I really hope that some of them will break into the top 50 and then the top 10 in the world. And we're going to support them. Okay. Right now it's happening online, but it's not an online academy. Eventually, when things open up, I hope to be able to interact with them in other ways.
But what's the idea behind it? Is it the search for the next Anand that we're looking at, that Anand has begun himself?
I'm trying to organize some support for them. Okay. And then also pass on my experience. So I will try and guide them for the next steps. Tell them how they should train and so on, and work with them and see how we can set up specific goals. So for many of them are amongst the top juniors in the world, and I'd like to make the transition into the senior circuit very smooth. Okay. So I'll try to work with them in that journey.
Okay, Anand, you recently celebrated your 51st birthday, and we also heard of a biopic coming your way. Was it a surprise when filmmakers approached you for a biopic? Or do you feel that this is the right time?
I certainly feel it's the right time now, which is why I accepted. And I'm looking forward to that. I mean, it'll be a new experience for me, but I am very curious to see how that will turn out.
Okay. Having said that, what's the message that you want to convey through this particular film, biopic on Anand? What's the underlining message, or what's the underlining talks that you've had with the filmmaker, especially when it comes to the message that you want to convey through this film?
I think mostly I'd like it to be an honest appraisal of my life and career, and see how that goes. It's not like I want to, obviously I'd like to guide them and share my experiences. But I think it's nice when something is honestly presented and you just want to see how people feel about that. I had the same sensation with my book last year, Mindmaster. I tried to be as open as possible, especially about chess and everything that I experienced. And I hope to do something similar with the biopic as well.
Well, was it the first thing that you shared with Anand Raj Anand, especially when he came and talked about a movie? Did you give him your book and ask him to read that in the first place?
He had already read the book, so that was a great starting point.
Okay, now, coming to this particular pandemic, how has it been, especially when it comes to players, especially when it comes to a game like chess? And this particular pandemic and the shutdown that we've seen almost for 9 months now, how difficult has it been for a player, especially when it comes to, not playing tournaments, but playing online chess? How easy or how difficult does it become?
Well, that's a good point. There was a lot of online chess happening before the pandemic.
True.
Chess is something which works very smoothly online over the internet. You can easily find a playing partner from somewhere across the world. You just log in, start playing. And a good part of our audience was already online. Having said that, there has been some loss of the feeling of sitting across your opponent, the sensation of being in a tournament hall, and there have been some adjustments to make, but generally I would say chess has transitioned quite smoothly. Possibly for the younger players, there's been a bit of disruption. They were planning to travel to a certain number of tournaments and suddenly they're all playing online. But, compared to many other sports, which often had to shut down just for a couple of months, chess has benefited. And the other important thing is that a lot of people have found their way to chess. So maybe people who never quite got around to it, suddenly they found themselves at home with time on their hands. And so membership in chess websites has gone through the roof. Okay. And there's been a lot of growth in the game that way.
Mhm. But how was the journey like, especially in this pandemic? You got stranded in Germany for close to 3 months and then you hit back home, now back home in Chennai. But how was that, especially that period when you were stranded there in Germany? Was it difficult? Uh, how would you explain that particular, phase where you could move nowhere, but caught in an European country?
It was fine. To be honest, there was it's a place where I have trained quite often for my matches, so I'm even used to staying there for a couple of months.
Okay.
And I was lucky. I was pretty lucky as things went. I have some very close friends nearby, so there was no real difficulty except that the option to take a flight. It's something you take for granted all your life, and then suddenly
True.
it's impossible to come back home. There is just no way. I tried through various countries to see if I could come back to India, and it just wasn't possible. And then finally, the Vande Bharat flights happened in May, and I was able to come back then. So the only sensation was I should be back now, but I'm just sitting here for a long time and unable to get back home to my family. But I was lucky as people went. I mean, I couldn't have arranged it better if I had to be stranded.
Okay. But now when you look at, since you made a mention about, how chess picking up online and especially this pandemic helping chess grow, what's your take on, especially, OTT platforms having a series called, The Queen's Gambit? Have you managed to see that? And what's your take on, especially that particular series that's been created all around chess?
The Queen's Gambit has been phenomenal for chess. I think it is the most watched series ever in the history of that platform. And it is quite remarkable. Now, for chess players, there are many things to like. I think they paid a lot of attention to detail. The chess is rendered very precisely. The positions on the board can actually be seen and appreciated, and they can be seen well enough that we could look up our databases and find those particular positions and those games. And a lot of the chess players' emotions and things felt very recognizable to me. But you don't get to whatever the number is, 68 million viewers only with chess players. So clearly it has struck a chord with the broader public as well. And in fact, subsequent searches for chess and articles about chess have all gone up. So it's been very, very good for the game. It's one of these unexpected things. In fact, it resembles the whole year of 2020, just full of surprises.
Okay. Okay. Now coming back to, Viswanathan Anand, how would you look at your journey? 1998, you became a grandmaster. 32-year journey. How would you look at it when you sit back and look at it as you get back home, being, in the company of your loved ones?
I don't particularly look back a lot, but yes, it's now 32 years as a grandmaster. There are now 64 grandmasters in India. In fact, 66. So we completed 64 and then we've had 2 more. And I think chess is in a very promising place in India right now. The sport is popular. A lot of people play it. And like I said, one of the things I'm trying to do with the Westbridge Academy is to take the next steps and set some targets and try and achieve them. But 2020 for me will mainly be the first half of the year, almost a forced separation from my family. And then I think the first time in 30 or 40 years that I've spent 6 months in a row in one location. That's also a new experience. I've spent a lot of time at home, and it's taken some adapting, but it turns out you don't need to travel that much. Life goes on.
Okay. But, since you mentioned 66 grandmasters that we have, we still don't have anybody in the top 20. What do you see as a stumbling block? We are creating grandmasters after grandmasters, but we don't see them, hitting the top knot, or especially at least even reaching the candidates. What's the reason, or what's the stumbling block according to you?
Sometimes it happens. You need a specific moment, a breakthrough, and it happens. To be honest, Hari Krishna is doing extremely well. He's very close. And Vidit isn't far behind. So we have 2 more people who are at least top 25, if not top 20. But yes, it would be nice if they broke through. I mean, Hari is obviously, I wouldn't call him a veteran, but he's been around for a long time. He's very experienced. What I'm trying to achieve with these youngsters is, again, streamline things a bit. Now, they're growing naturally, but I'd just like to interact with them, mentor them, pass on some of my experience, arrange training with the right people, setting targets, achieving them, that sort of thing. And if we streamline that and I'm able to work with them, I hope we will start getting measurable targets. I'm working with 4 of our best juniors and our best girl junior. So in all these cases, I'm quite excited. It's a new experience for me, but I'm looking forward to doing it.
Bishi, when you look at your journey and you look at, the other grandmasters in India, do you somewhere feel that, you did many things on your own as compared to today's players, who rather seem to be following more a prototype, especially when it comes to, charting their careers and, moving, especially on the GM chart?
It's very hard to compare the times. Of course, I started my career in a very different time.
True.
There were not many coaches in India, so I had to travel for many things. But the world has changed so much. I mean, computers, communications, all these things have changed, and even chess has changed along with them. So most of our youngsters, they're working with very good coaches that we have here in India. The best methods are easily exchanged, and they're following that. I think what I will try to pass on most of all is my experience during games and my experience in high pressure moments. But I would say that we have very, very good infrastructure. So you need a little bit of luck. I mean, you can do everything right, and still you need that break at the right moment at the right time to happen. But we are well poised. For instance, you remember earlier this year, we were playing the Chess Olympiad. I mean, we're a very good team, but there are no guarantees. You play, and each time the tournament takes its own course. But this time it went brilliantly for us, and we won a gold. So like this, I hope there will be more moments.
Okay. Now, since you mentioned, this particular point, you staying in Madrid for a long time and, adapting yourself to the European conditions, making a base away from home, making a base away from Chennai, that worked marvelously for you. Would you suggest some kind of moves like that to the current GMs that India have? Or do you feel, those were things that you tested at that point of time? In today's times where everything is, online, things could be much different for the new champions.
I think it's a great growing experience to live in another country and try to experience chess in different circumstances. So I would recommend that they do that, because it opens up all sorts of new doors. And for instance, Hari Krishna is now living in Europe. And as a result, despite the pandemic, he's able to play a lot of tournaments because intra-European travel is allowed, while intercontinental travel is much harder. But more than that, I think it allows you to grow as a person as well. So it's definitely a good experience, and maybe people should try it more. If not moving to another country, at least living there for a year, and things like that can be very nice for your development in your sport as well.
But when you look at your early days, how do you look at your mindset at that point of time? Do you feel that you needed to change your mindset, as you gain experience, as you played bigger tournaments, that you had to you brought more experience to the table, or that mindset remained a constant for you?
A mindset isn't something you consciously set out to change.
True.
It happens gradually, it evolves, but and that's the whole point of experience. You don't know in advance what you're aiming for, but you just go there with an open mind, and you're open to new ideas. What for me was very interesting was to interact with people who thought totally differently from me, but had excellent results. And then you find yourself asking, well, how come they see the world so differently, or they apply methods so differently, but it works for them? Let me try to learn from that. And I think that's the beauty of playing in different places and traveling. Though it must be said that by the time I went and started spending half my year in Europe, in Spain, I was already in the top 10. And so for me, it was a lot, I wouldn't say easier, but a lot smoother than, if you're doing this as a teenager, just trying to go and explore, then of course you'll have to arrange things differently. Again, maybe it's something for the most promising youngsters that the academy can support a bit.
Okay. You've played Gary Kasparov, you also played Magnus Carlsen. What's the difference that, you see amongst those two players, other than generation, but what's the basic difference that you see amongst the two champions?
Stylistically, also they're quite different. Kasparov, of course, has a very good understanding of the role, but in terms of his games, he stuck to a narrower script in
Okay.
the sense that he's super specialized and he did those things extremely well. When he was forced out of his normal zone, he did well, but he tended to do only things in a certain way. Carlsen experiments a lot more. He's willing to try almost everything. He seems there's a kind of restlessness about him, and that's maybe his main quality.
But when you look at these two players, Kasparov and Carlsen, do you somewhere feel that they are more polarizing players, especially when it comes to the chessboard?
Polarizing in what sense? I mean,
You either you
generally,
like them or you hate them, but you will have equal number of followers for either of it.
yes, but generally speaking, most top players, you will have a certain number of people who don't like you.
Okay.
It's not always jealousy. Sometimes it's just a rivalry, and people don't know where to stop. And you will step on some toes. So I don't. But I think it's a good point you raised. I think both Kasparov and Carlsen enjoy being in controversial situations. I mean,
True.
they like this kind of thing, and maybe that's the big difference between them and me. At least I don't choose it, but I feel that they do.
Okay, generally when you see great champions across sports, they seem to be somewhere self-obsessed, especially when it comes to their talent and especially what they bring to the table. Do you feel that you were different in that approach because, you were a nice guy who liked to win on the chessboard? Is that what you brought to the table that was different as compared to many other, great champions?
Well, what I confessed in my book, and I hope the biopic will reflect as well, is that the nice guy thing was a facade. Not that I'm not saying that I was not nice, but I kept a lot of my emotions to myself. I kept my cards close to my chest. And I think you cannot get to the top without being slightly self-obsessed, even slightly selfish. You have to focus a lot on something, and you have to force yourself to do it, or maybe you love the game so much you do it naturally. But invariably, this means you have less time for other things. I think some contemporary of Fischer once said that his whole brain is busy playing chess, so it has no time to do small talk with other people. I mean, a bit of an exaggeration, but you see what I'm getting. That you need to do at some points this obsessive focus, and it can look like you're lost. But an important skill then is to be able to switch off as well. If you never switch off, then you're never getting any rest.
Okay. Which is the most difficult atmosphere that you played in? There are many parts of the game that have been explored, especially you speaking about it. But which is the most difficult atmosphere that you felt that you played in?
Generally, there are certain opponents who create a hostile atmosphere during a game. And they're not breaking any rules, but everything is unpleasant about those games. And those were the hardest for me to adjust, because part of my brain is thinking about the circumstances and part of my brain is thinking about chess. Whereas when you play someone who doesn't do that, then all your energy goes towards the game. But I found that I learned over time to do better in those situations. I learned how to block out the noise and focus better, or even channel some of that. I mean, if I disliked an opponent, I found it easier to defend tenaciously, simply because you did not want to resign. Things like that. So I was able to channel some of it, and I got better at it. But
Okay.
with practice, you can adapt to most situations.
When you play grandmasters, two grandmasters facing each other, there is generally nothing that separates the two in terms of tactics. So what makes the difference when you play another? Just trying to understand it from a grandmaster's point of view. Two playing across the table, what's the difference, or what makes the difference, especially when two grandmasters play?
But between most grandmasters, they don't just turn up and play things. Both of them are aiming for something in that game, and that means, and usually that means that they have gone through each other's games before, and they're targeting something quite specific. So a lot of games between grandmasters involve a fair amount of preparation before. It's not that spontaneous unless you get into the very fast time controls.
Okay.
The second thing is simply certain obvious mistakes don't happen. They have trained thinks that, just by second nature, they don't make certain kind of blunders easily. And if you can provoke those blunders in some way, then it's really quite unexpected. So a certain amount of expertise gets built in.
Okay. How would you look at the 2014, title that the World Chess title that you fought in Chennai? Did you feel that playing at home was an advantage or disadvantage at the end of the day? Let's not look at the result, but how would you look at that particular title that you played at home against Carlsen?
So I had the feeling that playing at home could have been a big factor, but in the event, I was struggling with other things, both in my chess and in my, my levels of confidence and so on. So in the end, I think the venue played a small part. I would probably, given where I was at that time, with the problems that I was unable to fix and so on, I would have struggled in any city. Mm-hmm. But Chennai didn't help in that sense, because you would rather play in your hometown when you're feeling in the top of the world rather than when you feel that there's some work in progress.
Mm-hmm. But when you look at, we've seen many professional sportsmen around the world work on that mental game, especially. How would you say you worked on the mental aspect of the game, bouncing back after that, the 2014, blip in Chennai, to coming back to the candidates and, winning the candidates next year?
Quite often for me, when I have a disastrous result, you mentally, emotionally, you hit rock bottom. Mm-hmm. And I need to kind of almost start from the basics. I need to get away from chess and the chessboard and recover like that. And that's exactly what I did before the candidates. Now, I wasn't even expecting that it would work, or it wasn't a strategy. It was more or less just how I was dealing with the situation. But that's the positive effect it had. Okay. That when I got to playing again, I was able to play extremely well. I will just highlight one thing. I trained for all of 1 week in the 4 months leading to the candidates. And the thing was, I needed to recover my confidence and my psychological state, not my chess. My chess was good enough, but even when you're good in chess, if your brain isn't with you, then it's hard to implement that stuff. And mm-hmm. So when I recovered that way, the tournament went unexpectedly well, but I can see the connection.
Okay. But how would you look at it? Having a life partner as also your manager, traveling manager, does that help? Does that ease the pressure, or does it increase the pressure in any way?
Well, for a long time, we took it for granted that we would travel everywhere. And I think the first 15 years, we went to all tournaments together. And it's a certain kind of arrangement. I'm able to confide in her very easily. So that allows you to release a lot of steam. With your manager, if you like, but yes, my wife. And after the birth of our son, she had to travel much less. I mean, she came for the big events, the World Championships and so on, but she was not able to travel to other events. And I had to get used to the new situation. We were close, writing and chatting with each other, but it's not the same thing. But it was a big help in my career. In fact, my big growth back in 96, 97, when I just got married, was allowing her to do more and more things around the chess and focusing more and more on the game. And I think my big growth came there.
Okay. You started online. I see you and Aruna playing a lot of games online, especially for viewers there. What is exactly that you want to bring to the table, especially, are you trying to teach her chess, or is it some kind of camaraderie that you're building there over the 64 checkerboard?
Well, Aruna has figured out a lot of chess simply by being there for so long. Okay. So even if she doesn't know all the details, she knows, she'll be able to tell from a player's face, how things are going, and that she has a very good sense around chess tournaments. Excuse me. But this was an interesting class. We tried to get this idea that maybe you could teach your spouse chess. Okay. And how to go about that. We tried to do that in a natural environment. I mean, when you teach your spouse, you don't just hammer the rules. You talk and you make it easy going. And we tried to make it a fun class to teach someone about chess. That can be a spouse, but equally it can be a family member as well. And in this pandemic, we thought it's an excellent opportunity for someone to learn chess from a family member or a spouse.
Okay, learning chess from a family member is a fabulous idea. But now purely looking at, when you look at all your opponents that have, that you have faced across the chessboard, which is the toughest opponent that, you remember, or one opponent that you felt
That
was a tough nut to crack.
Generally, it would be the top players. I mean, people like Carlsen, Kramnik, Kasparov, Topolov, Gelfand. These are the names that come up, and each was different, was tough in a different moment, or at least on repeated occasions. But if you really had to look back now, I feel that most of the time I was my own hardest opponent. Sometimes when your level drops and you can't understand why, and you think, what am I doing? And very often chess feels like a battle against yourself.
One final word, 2020, the Chess Olympiad gold medal that you won was the first time that India won it. But how was the feeling? You know, you were like that father figure for the entire team. And how would you see the women's transition, especially, you know, the women's team, the way they have transformed themselves and where they have taken to the next level, especially when it comes to the game of chess?
Yes, that is exactly right. I mean, the girls and the juniors, by the way, contributed very heavily to our success. In fact, most of the wins happened on those boards, and the top boards were just holding up. It's very heartening development, and it was nice to win the Olympiad and everything, even though it was weird because none of us saw each other, and so the team spirit was all virtual. But in the end, you can't repress your joy, no matter how the circumstances are. We were all very, very happy for a few weeks, and you know, all these dramatic moments when everything went to the wire, and then we survive and get through to the next round. Even virtually, we simply bonded very well. It's one of the great memories for me for this year.
Well, virtually bonding well, and also, you know, memories for the year, especially India winning that first gold in Chess Olympiad. And that's not all. Also, one of those great sporting moments that India would have to cherish in the year 2020, which is almost taken over by the pandemic. Thank you and appreciate you joining us post 360 years. So that was Viswanathan Anand giving us insight about his new biopic, his book, and also his journey in chess. Thank you and appreciate you joining us on the Public Broadcaster of India.
Thank you so much. Pleasure to be here.